Hello and welcome back. If you are new to the channel, I make one game a month and this is my devlog. This year alone I have released 3 games: Space Box Wars, which is a roguelite bullet hell game; Loot Rat, a board game with dice where you play as Loot Rat, looting the city and give your loot to the hero so he can defeat the final boss; and my last game, The Last Mob Witness, a gun and beat 'em up game where you need to reach the card before the organized crime kills you. You can download all those games from itch.io in the link below. Don't miss the opportunity to play those games for free. With every game release, I improve my game development skills and allows me to build better systems. For the last game, I built a simple level editor, and after I finished that, I said I will release a better version of The Last Mob Witness in pixel art style. What that this means? Well, this week I started my journey to the new art direction and the workflow so I can finish drawing and implement this new version in a little bit more than 1 month. Probably I will have to generate between 500 to 1000 frames of animation for this version of the game, and it is almost impossible to do everything by hand in a month. So let's see how can I do it in 5 weeks. This is my last game, The Last Mob Witness. As you can see, the art style of the characters is very basic, very little animation because I did the whole game in 5 weeks, but there is a lot of work on the background sprites, so I want to have now animated sprites that will do justice to the game with lots of detailed animations, like this old game called Dead Cells, released about 5 years ago. It has thousands of sprites and characters. If you want to achieve the same level of detail by hand, you will need a very large team to do that, but since they are an indie company, they did it with very few people. So what's their trick? They use a 3D animation software called 3D Studio Max. So they render all the sprites in 3D to look like 2D animation cells, to look like sprites. So I will take a very similar path, as close as I can, but I will use open source software, and for that I chose Blender. I tried to use it a few years ago, but I was not able to do anything with it. It was too confusing for me, so this is round 2. And this time I will learn it in 1 week, otherwise I will not be able to finish my next game. Day 1. Learn to model, learn to make simple shapes and meshes, objects, learn how to navigate the tool and understand its workflow, and I finished the day by making a nice donut. Day 2. Learn about materials, how to put colors and shade them. I continue learning about modeling and the operators, so I made a cup and a dish. At the end of the day, I had this beautiful donut with a glass cup and dish. I was not looking for perfection, but something that looked okay, and I achieved that in just 2 days. Day 3 and 4. With the knowledge from the previous 2 days, I spent the next 2 days modeling my first character. I added a very simple character and added some very basic hair and suit. Day 5. Rigging and animation. This means prepare my character for animation, setting up the bones and things that will help with the animation process, so I can deform and pose the character as I wanted. I am very glad that Blender has many features that help me reduce the time spent on very tedious tasks, like creating the whole bone structure of the character. That can easily take a day for complex characters, and even more time if you want to animate it. In this case, I use Rigify that comes with Blender to set up the bone structure of my character, and it only took me about 2 hours to learn about it, including setup and adjusting it to my character, and another half an hour to animate my first character. But I spent like 2 more hours fighting the tool, trying to make it do what I wanted it to do. I still don't get used to the Blender workflow, but it is getting easier and easier every day. Still, I feel there should be many more shortcuts in the process, and it is not very intuitive from my point of view. Many steps do not make much sense to me yet. I also follow some tutorials on how to make your render look like cell shading, like 2D animation. I do not want to look photorealistic, so I added some basic colors, and by using those shading techniques to reduce the color palette of my character, I was able to get something that looked like matching the style that I was looking for. So at the end of the day, I made my first animation, and this is how my character looked in my last game. This botsy sprite with very few details. Then this is my first render of the new character using the techniques mentioned before, and now you can see the pixel art animated version of the character, which looks very nice. I still need to work on the rendering pipeline workflow, so I can add all those sprites into the game quickly with minimal manual effort. As of now, it takes quite a lot of effort to add all the render images into one sprite sheet that can be used by the game. Next week I'm expecting to have a very large number of animation frames for this character and start working with enemies. I feel very happy that I was able to understand Blender this time, so I spent a lot of time hitting my face with a wall, non-stop for hours every single day, until I found a solution somewhere. Blender is still hard to use, but I think you can learn it in a month or two, but I'm trying to learn everything I need from it in just 1 or 2 weeks. I'll learn basically what is needed to make game characters. I do not need to learn all the photorealistic rendering, and I do not want it to look like Donkey Kong Country. I want my sprites to look like hand-drawn. Simple shapes that will give enough information to the player, since the sprites of these games are quite small, 64 by 64 pixels. I may target a little bit bigger for some enemies, but that size should be good enough for this game and for most characters. The last mob witness used 32 by 32 pixels for each sprite, so the new version is going to double it. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for being here. We completed another quest. Woohoo! One more thing to celebrate. See you next week, but before we finish, let's see what is this week's quest. If you like this video, click like and subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. See you next week.